Good afternoon or good morning, depending on the part of the country you're in. I'm Jed Brewer with Below the Line Club and Study Groups, and really excited to have you on the call today to talk about one of our favorite topics, which is credit and collections. And we all know it's pretty easy, and I shouldn't even say easy, but selling products, I think it may be easier sometimes than collecting the cash, it feels like, but ultimately it's collecting the cash, vetting the customers, that is the key to providing the cash flow for our businesses. It's ultimately going to fund everything that we do. And it's a very important part of our business, and some companies do it quite well and other companies struggle with it. And so our goal today is to talk about best practices that high-performing credit departments employ. Really excited to have two credit experts on the call today to share their wisdom with us. One is Ann Pitts, who is the owner of the Pitts Group. And Ann is a credit strategist who over the last 18 years has worked with 100 petroleum companies to increase cash flow by improving their own credit and collection practices. She has a background as a banker. She's worked in the petroleum industry for much of her career, and also the founder of a credit community, which is a place for credit managers to network and share. Second person who we're also going to have on the call is Corey Watson, and Corey is a Senior Vice President at Lakel Insurance. Lakel Insurance provides, among other things, credit insurance and does a lot of work in the petroleum industry. And Corey runs the trade and credit division and works with companies across the nation to help them mitigate their AR risk. So really pleased to have both of these experts on the call with us today. And with that high-level introduction, before we jump in, we want to make this as educational to you as possible. I have you muted because there's many others on the call with you as well, and we want to avoid background noise that could that be a detriment to the call. So if you do have a question, in the GoToWebinar framework, probably it's a pop-up box on the right of your screen, there's an area to ask questions. Type those questions in. I will be able to see them, and I will do my best to relay those questions to Ann and Corey at an appropriate time to make sure that we can answer your questions. So without that, as further ado, Ann, let's jump into saving your bacon, best practices for high-performing credit departments. I'll let you start with a few high-level words.
All right, Jed, thank you very much. So guys, I mean, this is such an important subject. I could talk for days about this. It's all about your cash. And believe me, having a lot of cash on hand in a business is a great way to save your bacon, as evidenced by my pig here. So just to start out, I wanted to give you guys some things to think about, things that you should know about your accounts receivable and your credit department that you might not be looking at. So here's a few things. For one thing, tracking DSO or any other measurement of your choice. The KPIs, there's a whole bunch you can choose from. DSO has some pluses and minuses. I know you guys like to look at it though, but do it quarterly over a running period of 2 years. That's a good way to benchmark what those trends are in your own business. And it also makes allowances for seasonality, pricing and sales fluctuations, and those are all part of what affects DSO. Number two, are you
days of sales outstanding, right?
Yes, so yes, days sales outstanding. Yes, Jed, thank you. So look at your aging for more than just to see who's past due and who's doing what, but look at it with a critical eye to actually test the quality of those receivables. What columns are inflated, and what do you think you could do to move that money to the left on the aging? Just FYI, significant amounts in the over 60 column, that indicates poor credit decisions and or poor collection efforts. So you know the old management saying, don't track something you aren't prepared to fix. Well, be prepared to fix this and strategize on that. Number three, Who are your top 10 collection problems and what's the plan to collect? Your credit folks ought to know this really, really quickly. You know, often I see that just a few customers make up the largest percentage of past due dollars. Who are these guys? Are they repeat offenders? And what are we doing to remedy? I actually like to see an official top 10 collection problem report sent to management every 2 weeks. It just keeps them top of mind. Next, what repetitive interruptions are taking up your credit department's time? You know, this is a vampire effect. There's just so many things that happen that take up time. Example, salespeople are turning in halfway completed applications, and then the calls and the emails constantly wanting to know the status start coming in. So you identify what these interruptions are, and then you use technology so that everybody can see you know, what the status of the new accounts would be, putting the credit application on your web page for customers to complete. You know, that's a way to solve that. Another example of repetitive interruptions that I see are excessive notifications from your software on, you know, things like credit holds. And it certainly is important to know this stuff, but some of these are redundancies, and you really need to identify and correct these redundant time thieves. Another thing that's important to know is, why are customers calling your credit department? Do you have any idea what the volume of calls is and why your customers are picking up the phone? You know, are staff having to constantly send copies of invoices? You know, what that could be indicative of one of your systems. What about quality of billing, pricing, credit rebills? These are tasks and probably problems that are originating in other departments. They're just creating a whole lot of work for your staff when they could be doing more meaningful tasks. So,
Dan, a quick question for you. Why do you find that people are calling the credit department?
because of breakdowns in your system, very simply put. And that stuff you can fix, which is good news. You know, there's a reason that they have a question about an invoice or a question about the billing. Here's the thing, Jed. People that are calling you are not the people that are trying to get out of paying you. They're trying to solve a problem. So when you can figure out why they're calling and what those problems are, you could back it up into your system and try to fix it.
So would top performing credit departments, I assume, have minimal customers calling in?
Absolutely.
Their processes are so smooth, those problems aren't there.
That's right. That's it. So what we're going to cover, and I don't have a lot of time, so we're going to go through this quickly, guys, but I want to point out some pain points of unhealthy AR. I want you to think about your own business and what the impact is on your business, the symptoms of low-performing credit department, which creates these pain points. I want to go over the executive level responsibilities that are so important, and then finish up with some best practices. So I know you guys at your deepest level know this, but you become immune to a lot of the AR-related pain. You know, just looking at this graph, it's a typical petroleum company balance sheet. You can see that the accounts receivable in orange, it's only eclipsed in this company by the rolling stock. They've got a lot of trucks. That is a ton of company cash sitting there in orange. So, you know, when I came out of banking and came into petroleum, I was just astounded at the high level of dollars that are housed here in your in this, you know, portion of your balance sheet. And as I just said to Jed, there are certain things you have complete control over that you might not be doing now, and the end result is a faster cash conversion cycle. But you've got to do something different to get different results. So let's talk about pain points that you experience when you have unhealthy accounts receivable. I really would like for you guys to rate yourself on a 1 to 5, 5 being good, just to see where you are on this and whether it's something that that you might want to focus on as you start making changes. So what's your cash crunch look like? Are you having to scramble at times during the month to cover expenses, taxes, payroll? Are you hitting your own banking line of credit for operating capital because so much of your cash is tied up with customers using your money? So 1 to 5, where are you on that? What about reduced profits? If you're selling a lot of product, you have a lot of gallons going out the door, salespeople are kicking down doors, but at the end of the day, you just don't have as much profit as you should. You guys' margins are too slim to make any money if you don't get paid. And I mean, not just get paid, but get paid on time. So that's something to think about. Banking pressure. What What's happening with your covenants? Is your accounts receivable book holding up well under banking scrutiny? Is your line of credit well enough secured that you don't have to worry about your banking relationships? Staff fighting fires. This is a big pain point of unhealthy AR. Is your staff staying too busy working through flaws in your own system, haggling with your own employees, totally running a reactive department versus a proactive approach that really provides good risk management? And the last thing is owners losing sleep, and I'm not even going to have to go into that with you. You know about that. So take a look at your 1 through 5. You can get a good idea on what you might want to start thinking about. So I want to give you a visual of the buckets that make up your accounts receivable aging. What this is customers totally controlling your cash. A lot of these guys might owe you more than they even owe their bank. You are supplying them with sometimes a zero interest operating line of credit. So in this example of the aging, the dollar amount controlled by customers, even though they're sitting there at 86% current, it's over $1 million. Of that million, 62% is sitting in that 10 to 30 day past due bucket. What can you do to move that number to the left? Help those customers pay you on time. 23% is 30 to 60 days past due. Now, statistically speaking, most of this will be collected. But what just happened to your profit? So I just want to get your attention. I've never once heard an owner say he just got too tight on credit and it hurt his business. I hear just the opposite. So, it's interesting because the credit department is an area where problems that happen all over your company trickle down and present themselves as an unpaid invoice. There's a Credit Research Foundation statistic that states that up to 61% of all past due accounts are due to a breakdown or problem within your own system. That's actually kind of good news because you can seek those out, you can fix those, and imagine what it would do to your aging. Billing, pricing, what fundamentals of other departments are not being executed correctly, because that's what causes the breakdowns. So this is one of the things that I definitely look for. I want to go into some symptoms of a...
And you may end up addressing this, so forgive me if I'm jumping ahead, but what would be a common breakdown?
Oh my gosh, they're everywhere. They can be, as I said, that the billing department could be doing something incorrectly. The pricing could be done incorrectly. It can originate from the sales, the sales order. It can be the drop, the trucking. It can be, you go up the ladder from all the way to where that sales is initially turned in, and it can be anywhere up that ladder. And so many times I see departments that just really run hard and fast origination of it. And that's something that creates a lot of work.
Yeah. So is it common for firms
so let me go.
is it common for firms to know what their problems are and they just don't know how to fix it? Or is it more common that they don't know where the problems are?
Well, it's actually both. It's more common that they're just busy in the moment to fix something and they're not taking the time and the effort to go or identify the blind spot. And I do talk about that here in a minute. So, symptoms, I want you guys, again, 1 to 5, and I'm going to blow through these pretty quickly. Excessive slow pay. What have you trained your customers to pay you? Is there a general disorganization on processes where important things fall into a black hole until they bounce back as a surprise? Credit approval and credit limit debates. Are we recreating the wheel, with most of the applications? Or do you have a system in place that delivers dependable results based on facts, not emotion? A best practice is using a credit matrix or a scorecard. Great way to take the emotion out of the credit decision. Is there staff confusion on risk tolerance? Does your staff, and this is all the way from sales to dispatch to credit, all the way through the organization, really understand the company's appetite for risk, and do they stay between those lanes? Sales versus credit can be like cats and dogs. Excessive owner involvement in credit, that's something to avoid at all costs, guys. It creates overrides, variance from policy, and it trains your customers to go straight to the owner, bypassing staff. Another pain point is collection efforts are sporadic, ineffective, And the end result of that, it can be excessive bad debt write-offs. Okay, so I'm going to blow right through to common causes of these symptoms. And Jed, this is kind of what you just talked about. What would be a cause of those symptoms we just talked about? One of them is blind spots. That's really hard to fix internally because your staff just doesn't know there's even anything to fix. But a good way to identify those blind spots that's causing those symptoms is to ask. Ask employees in the correct way. You know, a good way to ask employees is to ask about one thing. Don't be general, be very specific. Don't go to the experts. By that I mean your CFO, your controller. Go to the people in the trenches. Ask people outside of the department if they know about something that would make a difference with a problem that's pooling up in that credit department. Do you have antiquated systems? I mean, they're honestly everywhere in a 50-year-old complex petroleum business. But the tricks to identify and improve, you know, are you systematized to the nth degree that your software will allow? Are you using it to its highest capacity? You know, you got to open your eyes to what is no longer serving you well. Ineffective communication, I hear about this everywhere I go at meetings. I don't care how large or small the company is. There are so many blocks to good communication, which is critical to create a high-performing environment. So something I see a lot in this, and it's really fixable, is loss of momentum. Your team has identified a problem, you know, let's say working with another bulk plant location, and things get bogged down in the project management. Before you know it, the momentum's gone. Everybody's off chasing another rabbit. So you need to have clear communication processes for resolving issues, and as quickly as you can get this done, the better. Lack of staff training and support. You got to give your staff new tools, new strategies. When was the last time your staff was exposed to new ideas and best practices from other credit professionals? You got to get them off their island and learn some new things and get fabulous tips from each other that they just haven't thought of. The way we've always done it, I don't think I need to say more about this, but you know, guys, are you converting people to electronic payment? What's your conversion rate? You know, are you still mailing statements? What are those tired processes that really need to be revamped? All right, so now I'm going to talk about executive level. And this is really, really important. It's got to be a top-down approach. I want you to think of this credit department as two segments. Segment one is general policy making and control. This is spelled out in a written policy organized by the executive level based on the company risk tolerance. You need a well-written credit policy clearly spelling out policies and procedures for each step of the credit function. Once the policy is written, it's to be distributed, educate your staff about it, then you can hold them accountable for following the policy. It actually makes everybody in the building's job easier. So segment two
how do
to
you
this.
disseminate that policy? It feels like a lot of people will develop these fancy policies and then it sits on a shelf and collects dust.
That's exactly what happens a lot of the time. And it's just, that's why I say it's got to be at the what level? The executive level, because really to the, it's a pain. I mean, it's a pain to write it, but if it is well written, it gives your employees a good idea of what they're supposed to do and not do. And then when they do something they're not supposed to do, it gives you a great counseling tool if you had held to this policy. And if somebody wants to go outside of the policy, you know, at a high level, sure, they can do that, but it's have them sign off. This is why we went outside the policy. It goes in the credit file. And then when something happens, you know why you went outside the policy. But it makes that day-to-day administration, Jed, so much smoother when they understand what they're supposed to be doing. So, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and it really, I'm throwing this slide up here. I started not to, but I think everybody will have a chance to look at these later if they want. These are just a few of the things that need to be touched on. You know, what happens when this happens? What do we do when that happens? This is all to be built into that policy, and it is a living, breathing organism. It's not something that gets put on the shelf and 5 years later it still looks the same. You got to keep reviewing it and changing it, redistributing it. It's just like a bank. You know, every bank has a 500-page credit policy. You don't know about it because you're a customer, but believe me, the employees know about it.
How often should you review your credit policy?
I recommend yearly. I I recommend yearly, and it might not have, if you do it yearly, Jed, you're probably not going to have major updates. You just keep up with it, but things are going to change. Your appetite for risk is going to change. New people are going to come into the building that have different ideas about, how you do certain things that are addressed in that policy. So I would say yearly.
Okay.
Oh, all right, best practices. This is from my experience, and these are what really companies that handle this well, this is what they do. Have a company credit policy that's detailed and instructive, where where if a new employee came in and sat in a chair, they'd be able to look at that policy and know what to do in certain instances. All the employees need to be aware, and at that point, you're more managing exceptions. You need to really identify, fully understand the credit department's bottlenecks and problem areas. What other departments are impacting this, and fix them. Not just understand them, but fix them. Technology. I haven't talked a lot about technology, but I could have a whole seminar on technology. Investigate every option your back office software provides for credit risk management. I spoke last year at the DM2 conference. I was shocked at the resources they offer for credit management. Really shocked about it. So I encourage you to use technology at every juncture, including making swift touches with an automated dunning letter on customers that don't pay you. Phone calls are effective and necessary, but a lot of customers will pay you if you just touch them. A quick touch using technology can move them right into that current column. Require consistent reporting and measurement. Decide what is important at the management level that you want pushed to management, and make sure it's meaningful, timely, consistent, and to be pushed, not pulled. This eliminates surprises. That top 20 report I was talking about, push that every 2 weeks. It eliminates surprises. You can also get some good feedback from people that are in the know in your company on certain problems. So increase your credit department toolbox, outside resources and education, access to a peer network, proper use of collection agencies, investigative assistance, and credit insurance. And I know Corey's about to address credit insurance, which is a great tool. Well, I went into a little more detail, but anyway, NACM is a great resource for outside resources and education. So I'm going to wrap my little piece up. I'm just right on time, but I want to give you guys some feedback to arm your employees, give them good tools, give them good policy, step back, let them do their jobs. If you need more weed information, because I tried to stay above the weeds, I didn't have really time to go in the weeds, I'm a phone call away. But arm them and let them go. All right, Jed, I think that's me.
Well, thank you, Ann, for sharing those best practices. You mentioned that organization there at the end. What is that organization? What do they do, the NACM?
Yeah, it's the National Association of Credit Managers. They do regional meetings. They also have a yearly credit congress once a year, and it's just a good way to put a ton of credit people in a room, and they offer a lot of education. I will say this, I think the big meetings are better than the small ones. Maybe the quality isn't as the same as the big meetings. I've done both, but it is there's not that many resources in the credit area, honestly. Yeah, so that's a good one.
We do a lot of study groups, right? I see your bullet point too there, establish a peer network for best practices, and you have your community.
It's a webinar.
A little bit of your community.
Sure. I put credit managers on the phone together once a month. We spend about 45 minutes. It's a closed group. There's no competitors. It's a webinar. They're in their office and they're asking other credit managers, how do you solve this? But I do want to. The key is it's a closed group. It's not open to every credit manager, so you don't have to worry about competitive issues. But it's just on the telephone.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, and I encourage people to ask questions too. Again, type them into the dialogue box, and we can come back with Ann at the end and wrap up any outstanding questions that people have. One question I will ask you, Ann, before we turn over though to Corey: what's the biggest frustration of the credit department?
The biggest frustration I hear about, and it is really, I mean, it's very, very common to hear it, is the growth. You guys are growing so much. You're acquiring, you're organically growing, and it's hard sometimes for this credit department to keep up with the volume being dropped on top of them. That is what I hear is the number one frustration. That's why you have to get really good and slick with your technology.
Yeah, so be good with the technology, because I mean, in our industry, there's a lot of consolidation going on, and it feels like you got to get bigger to survive in today's world, and people are growing quickly with acquisition, bringing in new customer lists, and does that create difficulty as well, making acquisition? You have customers that, you know, maybe you didn't vet, but you just bought those customers. Is there any practices around that may be unique?
It absolutely creates. One thing I do encourage you guys to do when you're doing that is involve your credit manager kind of early on. Don't just dump, you know, once the acquisition's done and closed and now all of a sudden we have, you know, 3,000 new customers. Involve the credit manager a little earlier on in the due diligence process so you can strategize about what needs to be done and what the steps are, you know, to integrate these new customers.
Thank you, Ann. Well, Corey, let's turn it over to you and make more bacon. I like your slides here. So yeah, share with us a little bit how to save our bacon from difficulty.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. I know Ann did a good job of talking about, you know, how do you save your bacon, right? So I want to talk more about how can you, through the use of credit, how can you make more money, right, opposed to just saving it. So I'm going to talk today about sort of a product that not too many companies are familiar with, and sort of educate a little bit about credit insurance. So over the last 10 to 12 years or so, I've worked with fuel companies and other companies from different industries, and I'll talk to a banker that's been a banker for 30 years or a CFO for 30 years, and they've never even heard about it or the concept about it or credit managers. So I think there's a lot of unknown about credit insurance. So we're going to talk today just for a little bit about credit insurance. I'm going to talk about what it is in general.
I was just going to say on that point, Corey, before you joined Lakel Insurance, you were, what, 10 years with Euler Hermes, who's the oldest and largest credit insurer in the world?
Yeah, so Euler Hermes, I was there 10 years, you know, working directly for the carrier, you know, and I'm now on the broker side, but it's I've been around it a long time, and that's all we've, you know, I've ever done is credit insurance. So
well, great. Yeah, tell us about it and how companies use it.
Yeah, so credit insurance, it's just it's an insurance policy, right? We're going to talk about what it is, why companies buy it, how's it structured, and then I'll touch a little bit on what it costs, because I get asked that quite a bit also, specifically to fuel, what that costs. But credit insurance is just it's an insurance policy that guarantees your receivables. So you're going to invoice the customer, and whenever you deem that receivable is uncollectible, then you would file a claim, and then the insurance company is going to pay you for whatever is outstanding, minus a deductible if applicable, or any type of co-insurance if applicable. So it's just an insurance policy. It's not a new concept. It originated and it's commonly used in Europe. So if you go over to Europe and you mention, you know, credit insurance, it's very, very common over there. You've got roughly 90% of the companies that use credit insurance. But in the United States, that concept is kind of foreign. The last numbers I heard, it's between 8 to 10% penetration of companies in the U.S. And I don't think it's because they don't want to buy it or it's too expensive. I just think they don't really know much about it or how it works. The policy covers bankruptcies. So if it's a formal or non-formal bankruptcy, then the policy would kick in and it would pay you. I know right now certain industries are getting hit harder, retail, for example, by bankruptcy. So credit insurance is covering quite a bit of that. It also covers general slow pay or non-payment, just general non-payments. If a customer doesn't want to pay, or if he's waiting to pay you until he's paid from his customer, which you see quite a bit of, that doesn't matter. The policy will pick that up. So there are lots of different reasons companies buy credit insurance, and a lot of companies will evaluate credit insurance to say, well, I don't really have many losses. Why would I buy credit insurance? Why would I pay a premium to cover losses that I don't have? Right. So I'm going to touch on, a few of the reasons companies are buying credit insurance. And the primary reason that I see in the market is sales growth. So you have companies that want to sell to a customer, but they don't feel comfortable selling to them, either because there's a lack of information on that customer. Let's say they don't know them, or let's say maybe their financials don't look that good, right? So they're hesitant to sell to that company. So they require cash up front or some type of prepayment or shortened terms. So credit insurance is a really good sales tool that, if I could insure that customer, would you sell to them? Right? So if you have a conversation with a group of salespeople, that would be a long conversation. But if you did, then you could ask your sales team, how many customers have we turned away in the past 6 months, 12 months because we couldn't get through credit, because they wanted more credit than we were willing to provide. So if you could write a policy, you could utilize credit insurance and maybe carve out just those customers, and you sort of have a sales growth bucket full of customers that you could potentially sell to because it's got a guaranteed payment. Or if you have certain customers that they want to buy more, say they have a certain credit limit, but they're always bumping up against that credit limit, and they're buying fuel from somewhere. They're buying from maybe a competitor to go with your limit because it's not big enough. So if you could double your limit, would they buy more? So the answer a lot of times is yes. So we're going to develop an ROI through the use of insurance, right? From I call it the credit function. So if you're going to support your credit function, credit insurance is a really good tool to do that, because you have this constant friction between sales and credit. Sales wants an answer, like Ann said. They may provide incomplete information on the credit application, or if your policy is personal guarantees, they won't provide it. So you have sales pushing, and you have credit, trying to get the correct data and have to make a decision. So credit insurance has a function in it that you can actually buy a policy, and you can take that company's name without any additional information, and you can plug it into these portals on these policies, and it will come right back with a risk score. One's the best, and 10 would be bankrupt, for example. And it tells you, depending on what their score is, how much coverage they can be automatically approved for. So this is sort of a way to quickly make credit limit decisions. You're still going to run your credit processes, but this is just one more piece in your credit process that says, hey, they're a risk grade 6, I can give them $100,000 in credit, and this is done in a matter of 5 minutes. So it's very, very quick. From a catastrophic risk, bullet point 3, that is what it said. That is what it is. So if you have 70% of your business is tied up with one customer, although he's going to pay me probably, that would be the one that would severely hurt cash flow. So some companies will come to us and they'll say, I just want to insure this one customer. So that would be the only one that would hurt us if he went under. From a bank financing, companies will say, I'm going to buy credit insurance. I don't care about sales growth. I don't care about my credit department. I've got a great credit team. My catastrophic risk, I'm okay. He's going to pay me. I just want to borrow more from my bank, right? So they'll buy credit insurance because banks have thresholds that say typically any receivable over 25% concentration, they will kick that out or exclude that from the borrowing base. Or if you have a foreign receivable, a bank will kick that out. So you can buy credit insurance. They will eliminate the concentration risk, fund on foreign receivables, typically advance your advance rate up to 90%, and then potentially lower your rate because you're utilizing an insurance policy to take the risk away from the bank, and you can typically cover the cost of your policy just on the additional bank financing. From an accounting perspective, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you about this catastrophic risk, and one thing I hear from customers who employ credit insurance is they want to cherry pick the risky people they want to get credit insurance on and pay the premium. The non-risky people, they don't want to insure. They'll take the self-insured risk, so to speak. There's ability to do that, right? Within you were talking a little bit about that in catastrophic risk. Why does that make sense to the insurer to do it? Is the insurer worried about adverse selection?
Yeah, so you can do exactly what you're talking about. You can insure just one customer. You can do that. Sometimes it's more expensive, right, to just insure one customer. But I hear all the time from companies, petroleum companies, that say, well, they said I had to insure all of my customers, and that's just not accurate, right? So from a structure standpoint, there could come a time when setting up a policy where it's just not that much more to go and insure more. But if you're okay with taking a $50,000 hit or $25,000, whatever your threshold is, then maybe you just insure companies just above that dollar amount. So Jed, I've actually got a spot on the next screen about structure, and we'll talk about that. But you're right.
Good. Thanks.
But I could go on about the bank financing piece. The whole point here is companies will buy credit insurance just for their bank. It has nothing to do with risk. So we're talking about additional ways how we can make more money or save money through the use of an insurance policy, because it's the only insurance policy in the world where you can make a return on investment. So it's a sales tool is what we're thinking about here. Reduce bad debt reserves. If any of your companies are reserving bad debt, if you could theoretically, let's say you bought an insurance company, you bought an insurance policy for the same price as what you're reserving in bad debt, then you can free up your bad debt reserve, put it back in your balance sheet. Now we can forecast our losses because we know they're going to be no more than the form of this credit insurance policy. And then you're going to write that off at the end of the year as a tax deductible insurance provision. So it's a little different way how to reduce or eliminate bad debt reserves. And then getting bigger limits from suppliers. Let's say you're trying to buy more fuel and you're not able to get as much as you need. When the price of fuel went up to $4 or $5, depending on where you live, it shrunk everybody's credit limit so that they couldn't buy as much. And in the fuel world, sometimes it's as much as you can buy as much as you can sell. So that hurt a lot of companies. So we were doing reverse credit insuring, where we were actually going to our company suppliers and saying, hey, if you get a policy, I'll basically insure myself, right? So the suppliers were owning the policy. The debtor was paying for the policy on a per gallon basis over like a 3-month span, and they were doubling their credit limits. So it was a really good strategy that we use today for any companies having trouble, getting enough credit from the supplier. A few examples. These are real examples from fuel companies on why they're buying credit insurance. One is I've got a company on the West Coast who he calls it a takeaway tool. He coined this phrase, not me, but he said, what we're doing is we're going and we're pre-vetting companies. We haven't even talked to them before. We're pre-vetting them and we're getting credit limits on them, and then we're leading with terms. So we're going to these companies, our competitors' accounts, and we're knocking on the door and we're telling them, of course, how great we are at what we do, but then we are telling them also you're approved for $100,000 in credit, because they've already done that on the, through the credit insurance without getting any additional data. So it's really, really aggressive from a sales tool. On out-of-town contractors, I hear all the time, I've been in this market forever. We only deliver in this range, so I know everybody in town. But there's a situation where maybe they're building a bridge or a highway construction project. So you have out-of-town contractors that are coming in, and you just don't know them. You don't know them like you know everybody else. So we've written policies just on maybe out-of-town business that's coming to your area. Highway construction, you pick up a big job, you need, bigger quantities of fuel than normal. This is the, reverse engineering. We've gone to the suppliers and we have them credit insure themselves. Hurricane cleanup crews, North Carolina was hit by, hurricanes this year, for example, and you had a lot of out-of-town companies coming in doing restoration work. They needed lots of fuel. So we wrote policies just on that. And then making credit managers' time more valuable. This is important. So credit managers, by far a hard job, right? They have a very hard job. So what if you could take all of the credit manager's time and take their accounts, and if you drew a pie chart that said, 85% of these companies are insurable, they're a solid risk, they're not risky at all, could the credit manager then free up more of their time to chase that 15%? Right? So they're making their time more valuable by, let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, if 1's the best, 10's out of business. If your insurance company could say, all right, all these 1 through 4s, that represents about 50% of your business or 60% of your business. Well, then the 7s and the 8s that you're selling to today, even though you've done your due diligence, those would be the ones that you would look for signs of trouble, right? And then emergency services is the last. If you need something done quickly and you don't have 3 to 5 days to wait for a credit answer to come back, you could get it done immediately through an insurance company.
Corey, one of the ways I heard somebody describe they use credit insurance, small business, they're in a local community, they know lots of people, and somebody was getting, long on the terms, and when you have personal relationships with folks, it can be hard to say no. But they were able to say, look, our credit insurance carrier, won't insure you. So it kind of made the credit insurance company look like the bad guy in the relationship as opposed to the marketer being the bad guy in the eyes of the customer.
100%. So what you're referring to there is basically leverage from that the credit manager can use to say, listen, we love your business. We'll continue to sell to you. However, we insure all of our receivables, not just yours. And we have this policy that says anytime we have an account that ages out past this far, we have to file a claim or we lose our coverage, right? So if we don't file a claim, once we file a claim, this big, ugly insurance company that, did so many billions of dollars a year is going to sue you. They're going to pay us and they're going to go after you. So can you help us to try to get this settled so it doesn't come to that? It's just a little different approach than saying, hey, pay me. And then you're putting, Jed, to your point, you're putting all the onus back on this big, ugly insurance company. It works, From a structure standpoint, this is what we touched on. I mean, you could say, I'm going to do every account we have. It's baked in our credit policy that unless the insurance company approves it and gives you a credit limit, then we're not going to do business. So it's full portfolio. You could do partial portfolio that says, I only want my fuel. I don't want my lubes covered. So you could carve out all of the lubes, for example. You could do single account. That's that one customer I just want to insure. You can do that. You can do business segments. You can say, I don't want this section of my business insured, but I do want this section. You can write a policy on that. And then you can do multi-term. You can do 1 or 2 or 3 year policies for progress billing on some big job site. So there are lots of different ways to structure a policy where it makes sense. And then lastly, we'll talk about sort of what's it cost. From a price perspective, I can tell you as many fuel deals as we've done, that the cost is normally going to be less than 1/3 of a penny per gallon. Okay, so to put that into perspective, it's probably the last digit of the rack. When you buy, if you round that up, that's the cost of your credit insurance policy. To be paid up front or quarterly, from a math perspective, if you have one truckload of 20,000 gallons of fuel, the cost on that is $60. That's what these policies cost. So we're not talking about, in general, credit insurance in general is not as bad as what people may think or may have heard. This is why I'm glad everybody's muted, because they're going to go, wait a minute, but this costs this and this costs this. But my last slide is just a summary. It's talking about, how can you use credit insurance to grow your sale? How can you make money off an insurance policy? You're going to ease the sales credit tensions. You're going to help credit. You're going to turn some of this into an administrative function, and ease the sales tension between sales and credit by giving them quicker credit limits. You're going to ease the sales credit tension. You're going to help credit. You're going to turn some of this into an administrative function and ease the sales tension between sales and credit by giving them quicker credit limits. and be able to make faster decisions. You're going to support the credit department to give them an additional tool where if they're pulling a credit app, maybe they run it through a credit insurance company also, and they get that score back to go along with the credit application. You're going to help them free up their time by understanding which accounts are problem accounts. You're going to avoid catastrophic and general losses. Of course, it'll protect you if someone doesn't pay you. Reduce bad debt reserves, forecast losses, and then potentially borrow better depending on the banking relationship and how, what the borrowing base looks like.
Corey, how do you recommend somebody who's never got involved in credit insurance before take that initial first step? I mean, you just go from never used it before to now I'm going to insure my total portfolio, or are there more intermediary steps that people would take?
Well, what I would do if I was exploring credit insurance is I would look at maybe some opportunities where maybe you're turning business away. I wouldn't even go for full portfolio. I would just say, you know what, I would gather my sales team up and I would say, hey guys, are there any accounts where we could sell more? And then I would have that vetted. I would vet all that, see if those companies are insurable, and then, do some math there. How many turns, 5 cents a gallon or 3 cents a gallon or whatever your margin is. If that passes a sniff test, then you could look at different ways to structure it and then have some conversations from there.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered your question, man, but
yeah. Well, I think that's helpful. And this may be a question for Ann, it may be for you, Corey, too, but establishing credit limits based on customers, based on the risk associated, what are best practices to figure out what those credit limits are? It feels sometimes like we're just pulling numbers out of the air.
Corey, can I go first, or do you want to go? Go ahead.
What I do, then you can speak. I look at the average 2 months worth of exposure at any one given time during a 12-month period. So that's the way we calculate it. I would calculate it, and you can probably speak more to that. But
well, I usually recommend the scorecard version, which is, you look at their, you do look at their credit report, you look at how long they've been in business, you look at the type of industry they are. Have you had previous dealings with them? You come up with about 12 significant measurements. It's just a spreadsheet, and you get a score when you hit enter. And what strength are they? I believe in taking the emotion out of the decision, which is what Corey, what you said too. It's not just because they're a great guy and a friend of the owner. That doesn't, make the whole thing an approval.
I agree. Just because you have credit insurance doesn't necessarily mean you want to sell to them. I think that's what you're saying too. But that's a fine line. So.
And another question here about credit insurance, Corey. It says, are most credit insurance companies the same? And what would make you switch companies?
Well, there are 3 primary credit insurers in the world, and they're called monoline credit insurers. Like there's a company called Euler Hermes, one called Coface, and one called Atradius. All right, they're the big 3, and they do limit-based underwriting where they take a company, they underwrite that company, and then they give you a credit limit, right? They change depending on their appetite that they have during any one sector or during the year, or their loss ratios, or how hungry they are for new premium. So that's constantly changing. But those are the big 3. Euler Hermes is the largest, and then Coface and Atradius, they're right there for second and third. So they're 3 very good companies. And then you have a whole handful of accounts or of carriers that are called non-cancelable carriers, and they don't have the infrastructure set up to underwrite each particular limit, but they will write a credit insurance policy on they typically will give you a big blanket limit, and they will, in their policies, they're not allowed to cancel a limit. So they're called non-cancelable carriers. And it's very good if anybody here has owned a policy and they've received a cancellation notice mid-year and they didn't like that. Well, we should talk about a non-cancelable carrier and what that means and how that works. So there's differences in the carriers, but if you've never shopped the policy or never looked around, there's lots of options. It's not just one company. We help with that.
Thank you. And following on credit insurance, can a credit insurance policy replace a letter of credit from a client?
Absolutely. So a letter of credit's gonna be, 1.5% to 2%, and it's gonna tie up working capital for your customer. They don't like it. Even if you're splitting the cost, it's extremely expensive. So rather than buying a letter of credit, let's replace that letter of credit with a credit insurance policy where you pay a tenth of, 10 cents per $100 or a tenth of a percent for the year. So it's a home run. If anybody's using letters of credit, you should look at credit insurance.
Mm-hmm. And then the question that
Your
may be related,
customers love it, yeah.
Yeah. The question may be related to both of you, but I need to tighten my terms with my customer for whatever reason, but my competitors out there aren't tightening terms. How can I go about that? And Ann, maybe I'll ask that to you first.
Yeah, so number one, I don't think you really know what your competitor, you think you do, but you don't really know. Everybody is working on getting better at this. They're just like you. They need that cash flow. But if they aren't, I honestly don't believe in mirroring others' bad practices. And, the sales process is where you set out in the very beginning, this is the terms that we can offer you. If they agree to it, and you get the relationship started and you do the things you're supposed to do on your side, they've accepted your terms. You're not asking for anything outrageous. And tightening terms sometimes in a 50-year-old petroleum company, it's necessary to do. It has certainly been done to you. You understand, sometimes it's just the way life changes.
Any thoughts for you on that, Corey?
No, I think sometimes terms are dependent upon how much you're making per gallon. So, I think companies are willing to take more risks. If you're making 7 cents a gallon, I think that changes your appetite for that customer. So, I don't know.
I totally agree with that too. Yeah.
I'll give you longer.
If you're going to take more risk, make sure you're getting it in the margin.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I'm expecting a loss. I know I'm going to take a loss in month 4, but I'm sure going to make all that money in 1 through 3, something like that.
Now, we can do that as a company policy, but when that loss occurs, emotionally, can the owners remember the policy and handle it?
Yeah, that's sort of where, if you're going to buy a policy, it helps to partner with somebody who understands it, that can make sure that your credit team has the policy baked into your credit practices. I think there's a reason Ann and I are on the same call. So if you have structured credit management practices and you buy a policy and the details of that policy are baked into your credit processes, you don't really have to worry about, am I compliant or not with the policy? Then you partner somebody to make sure that if a claim ever comes in, you're buttoned up and covered.
Yep. I agree.
Well, just in the last couple minutes that we have here, guys, I appreciate everything that you shared, but I'll give you the opportunity just to any last minute summaries of something you wish you had the opportunity to say, but haven't yet. And Ann, we'll start with you.
Well, like I said when I started, this was really a high-level discussion. We didn't have a whole lot of time. I enjoy getting into the real weeds on this stuff. So if anybody has any challenges, questions, whatever, don't hesitate to reach out. I did actually have a title slide, like Corey's nice slide here, but I forgot to show it. So, and I'm sure you guys put this on your webpage. So if anybody needs my contact info, it's there.
Sounds very good. And for the audience, I will send out both Ann and Corey's slides to you after the call. I've also recorded this webinar, and we'll put a recording of it on our website. And I'll send you a link to that. So if you wanted to review it or share it with a colleague or a friend in a different company, please feel free to do so. but that will give you Ann and Corey's contact information for following up. And Corey, your summary.
Well, I would just say if anybody's ever looked at credit insurance, or even if they have a credit insurance policy, it's worth it. It's worth, if you don't have one, it's worth looking at it to see from a purely a mathematical standpoint, does it make sense, right? It's worth that exercise at the very least. If they've had a policy, it's worth having someone take a peek at it to make sure that there's no room there to improve that. You know, sometimes I think misconceptions they keep people from doing things that they may want to do. So credit insurance is a good tool.
And Corey, how involved or time consuming is it to get a peek at credit insurance?
You need 4 pieces of information. You need answers to 3 questions and an aging report. That's it. So it's real simple. And then the process takes about a week, and there's some underwriting that's done. So at the very least, you would come back with a list of, say, 20 or 25 of your customers, and it would tell you these customers are good and these are bad. So a lot of companies sometimes go through the exercise just for that. Just say, who am I really selling to, you know? It's a pretty simple process, though.
Well, thank you both, Ann and Corey, for sharing these best practices with us. Appreciate you, audience, for being on the call. I hope you found it to be of value. Again, I will send out this follow-up slides so you can have as a resource to use going forward. And wish you all well as we all strive to make our credit departments be best in class. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jed.
Thanks,
Thanks everyone. Bye.